You don't, huh? Yeah. Since you choose the easier one, so you go first.
Did you say everything?
Yes, I think so.
Please repeat it.
Huh?
Please repeat it.
Oh, we're off to
Since,
big
yeah,
conversation.
since you choose the question, the easy one, so you go first. It's not?
No.
Well, we're supposed to transport them by air freight, or the majority of them by air freight.
Yes.
So the original packing process would be to pick them off the actual line
Yeah.
and then bring them back to like a sorting facility. Because they're usually sorted in like first, second, thirds, depending on the condition of them.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And then
So you bring the cherries from the orchard back to
they're usually done all at the same place. So you
Yeah.
take them off the line and then you
Yeah.
sort it, and then you sort them, and then they're packaged usually on the site, and then they're kept in like a cool environment till a truck or train can come, and then they're taken to the airport, and then from Launceston to an international airport, so they have to be flown to either Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, and then for an international airport, for that to then be taken over to Tokyo and distributed to Tokyo.
pretty easy. Well, a little bit more detail. Well, we can assume that every single orchard, cherry orchard, would have a packing shed, but this is not really the case. This is one thing. So, which means if you don't have one, you need to actually road transport cherries as fast as you can, and you need to cool down the cherries before you actually start sorting and packing them. Now, when you say, well, yes, you use the air freight, correct? But what kind of package will look like before they go to aircraft? They're in small boxes or what?
They'd be packaged into small boxes for sale.
Yeah.
Or,
And
then put into a refrigerated, what are they called?
ULD.
ULD, thank you. And then the ULD will be placed onto an aeroplane.
What's a unit?
It's like the small unit thingies that go in the aeroplane.
it's the equivalent of shipping containers,
Yeah, but for a plane.
but for aircraft.
Yeah. Come on, air freight.
Yeah. So in fact, in the packing shed, cherry boxes will either 3 kilo or 5 kilos packed onto what we call air freight export pallets. So they differ from other pallets. This is for easy movement because you don't want to stack 5 kilo boxes. So they are pallets when they packed in the processing factory. So you go to Melbourne or Sydney and then straight to Palace or to Tokyo. Yeah. And then from the airport road. Yeah. Okay.
This is it. So when Steph and I were in Adelaide, we drove through the ports,
Yeah.
and there was like a pallet facility
Yeah.
there, and like these are all pallets. Yeah, and there was like heaps of them. There was
Yeah.
like probably 3 more rows of
Yeah.
this many. And
Yeah.
we were just like. So with that's what they'd be packaged on.
The ULD. So they in different shapes depending on which part of the aircraft they will be stored. They once again they're different from the standard shipping containers. So simply because we want to maximize the space in aircraft. So around the edge, you can imagine the shape will not be square. So it's kind of sometimes a little bit weird shape. So the second part. So what are the key factors?
So it's a perishable item.
Perishable items, yes.
So
Right.
we need to massively consider that, and probably given that they've
Hey guys, listen, because you need these two questions are different. So you look at that kind of similar, but they're different, and it's helpful for your assignment. The reason I'm doing this now is it's just to help you as much as I can for your assignment. Yeah, continue.
So they're a perishable item, and I'd say there's probably a very niche marketplace for premium cherries in Tokyo. So you kind of go grab it as it comes with seasons.
Yeah.
So key factors are perishable. There's a niche market, and the season's not that long. And then anything else?
Okay. Well, just on they're perishable. So they're perishable. Yeah, that's the characteristic of the cargo or the product we're talking about. But how we look at it, because they are perishable. Yeah, well, the key factors, well, in this transport process, we need to make sure it's cost effective, it's fast.
Well, based on shipping versus air freight, there's really next to no question about which would be the fastest. It may not necessarily be the cheapest, but when you put in all factors, you factor they're perishable and people are willing to pay excessive amounts of money for it.
Yeah.
It actually turns out to be the best option.
Yeah. But yeah, what if we have, say, daily, we have 50 tons of cherries need to be shipped out by air from Tasmania to Melbourne or to Sydney? Can we do it?
What would it be 50 tons worth a day?
It's a lot of cherries.
Yes.
So I guess,
Even say reduce to 5 tons.
well, I guess you
Would
could-
that guarantee that we have the capacity to ship those out by air from Tasmania?
Probably not, no. So you'd probably use a ship overnight to get the cherries from Tasmania to Melbourne, which is a hub. And then from Melbourne, or you would distribute them to the airport,
Yeah.
an international airport, whichever is in London. And then from there, they would be distributed onto a plane, or several planes, to be flown to Tokyo that day, or in the coming days.
Okay, so let's move back a little bit, just make it logical. Because they are perishable, they're premium, high value. So the first thing we want to make sure that they will be maintained in an environment that will maintain that quality. So that's the temperature. So we needed to have the temperature control right from the beginning to the end. So the key factor here is well, how the temperature is maintained through each stage.
Refrigeration.
Yeah, refrigerations.
Refrigerated containers, refrigerated trucks, refrigerated holding facilities, refrigerated transport. Like, you just refrigerate. Keep them cold.
Not too cold.
No, you don't want them to freeze, you want them to be happy, comfortable temperature. Always keep like that.
Yeah, the second bit, fast and cost effective. So we're back to the question, yes, air freight is the option, right?
Yeah.
But then, because we're talking about the key factors, so the key factor here is well, whether we have the capacity. So if we don't have the air capacity from Tasmania to the mainland, the second option here is possibly through the ferry.
Yeah.
Much likely, actually.
Yeah, it's most likely.
It's a common practice for refrigerated containers to be put onto trucks, and then they catch the overnight spirit, and then they go straight to the airport from there. So,
And then on top of that, the toll runs a ship every day, except for Sundays.
Yeah. So we have large capacity on ships, right, across the Pacific. And we need to ensure that we do have very good connection between, if we're using the ship, between the ships and aircraft. So make sure we don't wait for too long, because anytime we wait in the airport or in a sea terminal, that's waste of time. So these are characters. When you do your assignment, these are the small details, but these are the details I wanted to know, because these are key things. In reality, these are the key things. Even when you say, well, refrigerator also, it's even not good enough just to say, well, refrigerator also, we have to monitor the temperature right from beginning to the end. And we're sampling them every few seconds to make sure the temperature is in the right way. Now, just on the point of we ship cherries or other fresh fruits for export, and one mainland, either Melbourne or Sydney. Now, we have an issue here because Tasmania has the status of free of fruit flies, which means in many cases it's the quarantine side, or in this case fumigation, not required. But if we have loosely or pallet exposure is not sealed in containers, then there is a possibility that we have to go through the process inland, because they already landed inland if they're not sealed. So only on the condition that we have those products, Tasmania products, fresh produced already, quarantined, sealed, then they can be used this way. Otherwise, they needed to be fumigated in the other end, because this is another detail, probably not required, but if you go to the details, there are lots of details there. Okay, we haven't actually touched the cost effective. How can we make it
Anybody
cost?
else want to say?
Well, for cost, to get it to the mainland, the lowest cost would probably be to get it over on the Spirit it has in a refrigerated container on the back of the truck. And whether you make a turnpike double to get 2 containers across, that would be to be decided. But definitely that first part would be on the truck and then on a ship, and then you would make it on a plane, probably on a cargo plane, departing Melbourne or Sydney, as they are the bigger airports which would have larger capacity cargo planes, even though the domestic would be, not domestic, sorry, even though the combination carrier would be cheaper, you would not have the control over the products as such, as good control, and be able to store as much in there, because the more products you put in, they'll bump up the price probably. And then once they get to Japan, it would just be trucks again, because it's probably the cheapest way to get them around, and probably one of the only ways to get them around, unless there was convenient rail way to do it.
Okay. So when we try to use the concept we've been talking about many times, using trucks or containers, full load, we assume we have the quantity, but when it comes to cherries, not necessarily we are sending 50 tons each time. Just imagine 50 tons for cherries, it's a lot. For coal, for iron, or for raw materials, it's nothing. But it's huge for a premium fresh produced like cherries.
More often than not, though, especially with Tassie, is that a lot of our fresh produce is shipped together. So it wouldn't just be cherries. If in a full container load, it would be cherries and apples and strawberries and raspberries. And the companies would actually get together through a freight forwarder who specialises in this, for Tasmanian companies, so that each company wouldn't have to bear the cost of fumigation if it wasn't all packaged correctly on the mainland, and all that sort of thing. Is the companies share all that cost.
Okay, so we don't go too much detail because otherwise we'll bring out more problems, because even for fruits, the different values, the way they handle it will be different. They require different temperature. So once again, there are lots of other things we probably don't need to actually address just in this unit. Okay, just to stop here, and I'll just go for the first question, and then I'll summarize a few other things that we'll probably will think about in your assignment. Okay. The group here. I need it somewhere else, James. You have talked about many times. I need it somewhere else.
I wrote the notes, so it's
I need it somewhere else. I know you've been doing the job. Yeah.
Okay, so we transport frozen beef from Tasmania as a feeder and to hub, like Melbourne or Sydney, so it can achieve more efficiency. And then from there, we transport by ship
Yeah, by ship.
to Australia, to Europe, and our group have like 2 ways. One way is to Amsterdam first, and then
From where to Amsterdam?
Melbourne or Sydney.
From Melbourne or Sydney?
Yeah, to Amsterdam, and then from Amsterdam to Paris.
Yeah.
By truck. Yeah, by truck. Or by truck.
Yeah.
To achieve cost effective.
Mm.
And then another one is to by ship arrive at Paris, some big port, and then go rail to Paris.
So, little bit difference is how you actually move the container or containers from the port to Paris, right? Either by the truck or by rail. Is that correct?
Yes. So the key factors is...
And then stop here. We need to look at the process. For you guys from Europe, do you have other options in terms of which port to use?
So you mean there's a port.
No,
There are
to-
ports in France, if that's what you want to know.
If something from this direction, from Oceania or Asia, going to Europe, in particular to France and to Paris, will they propose Amsterdam? What do you think? Is there any port in France actually big enough and
There are ports in France that could be big enough, but I'm pretty sure that they would go to the Netherlands.
Netherlands?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we
Because of the frequency of the ships.
Okay, so this is my next question. Did you actually try if you have line shipping directly from, not say directly, but along the way without any transshipment in between, from Melbourne to Amsterdam?
Most likely it would be, since Amsterdam itself is the biggest container ports in the world. And
The Amsterdam, yes,
and
correct.
in the Euro area for Australia, like Sydney and Melbourne.
Do we have enough to utilize the container ship right from Australia to Europe?
Maybe not the ultra large 20,000 plus.
Yeah, you probably can try. Certainly Australia not using 20,000 plus TEU ships at all. Certainly not you, probably 15, yes.
So would you say I could go to Singapore? So from Melbourne, could go directly to Singapore, and then from Singapore it would be put onto a larger ship to be shipped to Amsterdam, to then be distributed from Amsterdam to Paris by either road, ship, and/or air freight?
Probably more likely. Yeah, thank you. It's more likely you go through Singapore because you're talking about the efficiency and the frequency. Certainly, you get much higher frequency in Singapore transshipment, and we don't use that large ship from Australia as sort of straight to the next larger port. Okay, so. So you do mention that you are going to use the refrigerated containers
Yes.
for frozen beef.
For the frozen beef, there's really only one thing that's really a key factor for it is that keeping the beef frozen.
Yep.
That's the only
Yep.
objective
Yep.
for
Yep, right through. Yes.
So most ideally would be transported in the same refrigerated container the whole way, while on a truck and on a ship.
Yep, absolutely. This certainly will be the requirement. So you're not going to move the frozen beef out of the container and load it onto a different one. No, definitely will be in the same refrigerated container. Okay, the second part. No, you stop. Sorry, James, I just made it able to get in.
Some of the factors that we consider is the distance traveled and the type of the beef that the cargo that we are carrying, which is quite perishable, which is beef, and the frequency of the ships, as we talked about, frequency of the ship traveling from Australia to Amsterdam, which was our initial point.
Yep.
And the amount of beef that will be shipping out, that is one of the factors that we consider that will play a major part in transporting the ship. If the shipment, it's either we're carrying a full container load or we have to consolidate the beef with other frozen items in order to satisfy or to fill that container, frozen the cooler up. Yep. And then we have to utilize the hub and spoke system in Melbourne, Sydney, and in Amsterdam. Those are factors that we come up with.
Yeah, good. There are a few points. Now, this is for your assignment. Also relevant, obviously, to the current two questions. Now, when you say, well, this is a full container load. Now, in your assignment, because I found some already, I received some questions actually asking, well, whether this is a full load, the high definition TV, or it's what? Now, if you wanted to make assumption, so you don't go either way. You just say, well, because a container load of something, for cherries, yes, that's a lot. For frozen beef, it's not. Well, it's 20-something tons. If we're 40 for the container, a little bit more, up to 30 tons, less than 30 tons. But it's not huge because we're talking about tens of thousands of tons of beef export. So you make assumption this is a full load. So in your assumption, the same thing.
What kind of ship are you using? Because you're transferring bulk to the one place and then transferring containerized stuff.
No. This is a different thing. In your assignment, you have two completely different stuff. So the ships will be used, the transport processes, two transport processes are very, very different. So you're not using the same ship. They're completely different. So just based on what's been given, and you explain the process and use whatever most suitable for that purpose. Yeah, but for each individual stuff, high definition TV or the raw material, if you think not very clear, make assumption. You are allowed to make assumption. So in this case, we'll say, oh, if this is fully loaded or it needed to be consolidated with others, well, make assumption this is a full container load. This is one thing. Now another thing, very good you picked up is because this is obviously for tutorial for the last module. We talked about global transport systems, we talked about hub and spoke system. So once again, this is something you need to pick up because this is how we do it in reality. So we, instead of going right from Melbourne or Sydney to Amsterdam, we most likely will stop somewhere, which is in Singapore, because we can use much larger ships from Singapore to Europe, and obviously more container traffic from Singapore to Europe. So therefore, more shipping services. Okay, so it's started from Tasmania to mainland, and then through the network to the other end. So it's a system, global system. Okay, and if we go more detail, because ask about key factors, well, we talk about the terminals. So what are the key factors? Well, the real part of reason we go through Singapore because it's en route. One thing, geographically it's en route, right? From Australia to Europe, it's en route. So it's geographically advantageous. The second part is because Singapore is very productive, very efficient, and therefore the time saving, the cost saving. So these are the things that you have to consider because we talk about cost effective. And fast, you mentioned already, you know, the speed, you can't increase the speed of those vessels because these will be determined by those shipping lines, shipping companies. If they are high demand, will they go faster, but not over the limit of those ships are capable of, but still they can adjust their speed. But it's more important for the frequency because you don't want to wait for too long. Ideally, offload from one ship and load onto another ship straight away. Right? Ideally. Okay? Yeah. So these are the things that you needed to look at in the in your assignment. Okay? I'm not expecting that you cover everything because it's not possible. You cover everything in your assignment, but you need to pick up those most important things. And because the question about in your assignment is compare and contrast. So you don't just explain it. For one transport process is from this point to the end point, and the next process from this point to the end point. Now you actually need to discuss what's the similarities and difference, because compare and contrast means you need to identify the similarities and the differences. Okay? Yeah. Any questions about your assignment? By the way, you are doing absolutely right things by coming to the classes when you still got lots of assignments to do. I certainly understand you have, many of you actually have 4 assignments due in the next probably 2 weeks. That's right, less than 2 weeks, yes. I certainly understand, but it's much better for you to stick to the schedule and come to the classes, because otherwise you miss the class and you need much more time to make it up if you can eventually. Sometimes you can't actually make it up by spending more time. Otherwise you don't need me. Okay, let's have a break and come back to the module.